Hi, everyone. I can see that we have a lot of people joined us already. I'm gonna give it like 3 to 4 minutes for everyone to join, and then we're gonna kick off with the webinar. Hi, Nushin. Hi, Halima. Hi, Hajar. Thank you for writing us in the chat.
It's nice to see some familiar names.
Yes, it is. Nursery names as well.
Yeah.
Hello, Melissa, Helga. I just like to say hello to everyone. So
It's
Hi,
nice.
Gloria.
Nice. And I was just wondering if it's the Melissa I know or another Melissa, so it's exciting.
Angela, Gloria.
Good morning. Someone's joining from somewhere.
From Canada, I believe, Angela.
Good morning to Canada.
As well, Anna.
Good
Kelly.
morning to Kelly and Anna.
Oh, and
I am another Melissa.
Well, whichever Melissa you are, it's lovely to have you with us. Thank you.
Hi, Atika. Okay, I think we're gonna start. I'm gonna do my usual introduction for the people who joined us for the first time. So hello everyone, thank you for joining us today to discuss how to build resilience through a risky play. Practical tips for creating safe environment. I am Nadine Osalem from Parent App, and I will be your moderator today. This webinar is brought to you by Parent App, and for those who may not know, Parent is a communication tool specifically designed for early years centers. As such, it is important for us to address topics that matter to our customers. Now, let me take a moment and introduce our speakers. Dr. Sarah Rogers, the CEO and founder of EYES and Quest, with over 25 years of experience in the education sector at a senior level in the UK and overseas. Sarah established EYES and later Quest to enhance the quality of education in both early childhood and primary sectors. Sarah is a hands-on and proactive CEO who not only manages the daily operations of the company, but also actively contributes to the industry. She is a frequent guest speaker at major educational events and conferences in the region, and she provides a number of continuing CPD courses. Next, we have Michelle Blackwood, General Manager at EYES and Quest. Michelle started her work with children in early childhood as a physical development program leader with her local council in Scotland. During this time, she spent considerable time in nursery settings and became interested in classroom practices and child development. This led her to retain as an early years practitioner. Over the last 15 years, Michelle has held senior teaching positions and management roles in nursery settings in Thailand and the UAE. And now we have introduced our speakers. Please note that this webinar will last for about 45 minutes, followed by a Q&A session. And if we don't have time to answer all your questions, we'll try to answer them via email. Please share with us, where are you coming from? I can see a lot of people saying hello, but it's also interesting to see where are you joining us from. Dr. Sarah and Michelle, hello, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Nadine, and thank you to everyone for joining us. We're really pleased that you're here today, and we know it's a very busy time of the year for us. So I'm going to start off by handing over to Michelle to start us off, please.
Yes, so and I think pressure's on, Sarah, to make sure that we stick to 45 minutes today and don't go over like last time. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk through risky play today and how that can build resilience in children. But I want us to first of all start to think about what do we actually mean by risky play. So risky play is defined as any activity that is thrilling and exciting and involves some risk of injury to children. And that can be different. There are different types of risky play, and that includes things like playing at heights, so on climbing frames, playing at speed, so children using bicycles, tricycles, and so on. It also involves using dangerous tools, so sometimes we might use hammers with children or other dangerous equipment. And it also involves children getting lost, so hiding activities where children are no longer seen by others, and it can also involve rough and tumble play as well. And often when we become responsible for the safety of children in our settings, we tend to view risky play as something that should be avoided. And we then tend to wrap children up in cotton wool or bubble wrap to avoid any accidents or injuries from occurring. However, risky play is very, very much part of children's development, and they seek out risk and challenge. And it is really important that we do give them opportunities in order to take risks throughout their time in our settings, because it does help children become more resilient, helps them to become more independent, and it also helps them to become better at managing themselves. So as we go through today's session, we are going to talk to you about the importance of health and safety and ensuring that we provide a safe but yet stimulating and challenging environment. We're also going to talk about the role of risky play and why it's so important, and how we can hopefully create a good balance of that within our settings. So Sarah, I'll pass over to you.
If you want, ladies, we can run the polls now as
Yes,
well.
thank you very much. I was just going to say thank you, Michelle, for that introduction. So there's lots to talk about this afternoon, but what we really want to do is try to be more interactive with these webinars. So we've set 3 polls this afternoon, which Nadine is going to open up shortly. Each poll is a multi-choice, so it's very, very quick to answer. So if you wouldn't mind just casting your vote in the poll. So one of the questions is about whether parents understand that balanced approach to risky play and the benefits of it. Another question is about, do they understand how risky play builds up resilience and well-being? And the third question is, do parents wrap their children up in cotton wool, or as Michelle says, in bubble wrap? I've never heard that expression, Michelle, bubble wrap. So cotton wool, and if you're not sure about that expression, that just means, you know, cotton wool is very soft and safe. Do some parents overprotect their children? Do they stop them doing anything and metaphorically wrap them up so they never, ever get hurt in any kind of risky play? So if Nadine's going to open those polls shortly, and if you can just, we'll come back to those later.
Yeah.
So we just really want to say about why it's so important to keep all children safe. Obviously, we want children to grow up to be happy and healthy. That's very important to us as they explore the world around them. And obviously what we need to do is keep children safe, or that will not happen. Michelle just spoke about dangerous or risky tools, for example, or risky events like climbing. And obviously people's ideas of what is risky can differ. So somebody might say a hammer is risky, a child using a hammer, or somebody else might actually consider using scissors are risky for a child, and we'll come back to that. But what we do know is that children are very vulnerable and they cannot assess the level of risk the same way. So again, we'll come back to that later, how we can help them do that. Children want to learn about the world around them. They are very inquisitive, but they don't understand those dangers around them. So obviously what we need to do is protect them and keep them safe from harm. It is very, very typical or normal for every child to want to explore their environment. Their brain is expanding rapidly and they are taking in information from their 5 senses, and they're learning all about the world around them. So they want to really test what's going on. And even if they've been told no once before, they want to find it out for themselves. So we're going to talk this afternoon about how important it is to let them do that while keeping them safe. So that very balanced approach to risky play. Okay, thank you, Michelle.
Okay, so we may be surprised to know, maybe not, but most accidents do actually occur at home, and generally our settings will be very safe environments for the children. However, we do need to ensure that when parents enroll their children into our nurseries, they are able to do so with the utmost confidence that their children are going to be safe and protected from harm. And as practitioners, we should be doing everything we possibly can to ensure that our environment avoids any unnecessary risks. And I'm going to use that word a lot this afternoon when we talk about risk and challenge. So risky play is not about us standing back and saying to the children, yeah, just get on with it. I'm just going to watch and I'm not going to do anything to support you. It is not about that at all. But we do have to make sure that our environments are safe. But we also have to remember that even the safest environments that we create in our settings, accidents will still happen, okay? And different accidents will be common with different age groups of children that we're working with. So if we think about our very youngest children who are starting to learn to walk, okay, they are more likely to have lots of bumps and trips as they start to wobble around and as they start to get more confident on their feet. And as practitioners, we should be making sure that there are no unnecessary risks around where they will have serious injury from doing that. But that doesn't mean we take it away altogether. Okay, so we're going to talk about a balance as we move through later on as well. So we do have to make sure that we are keeping all children safe in our settings, and we have to remember that children come into our settings with very, very different experiences, very different backgrounds, and they come from environments and families that have very different expectations or beliefs around what children should be doing and how children should be learning. And when children do come into our settings, they're going to be exploring with lots and lots of activities that they've possibly never tried before. Okay, and we tend to give children more freedom when they come into our settings to explore messier activities, noisier activities, or activities which are much, much more active than they may have done at home. And as Sarah mentioned, children really enjoy exploring the world around them and trying new things. And this is very, very important for them because it is how they learn and develop. But as Sarah did point out, children do not have the skills required in order to be able to make assessments or decisions about their own actions or how that impacts others. And that is something that we as practitioners really have to support children to learn and to be able to do. And if we do keep wrapping them up in cotton wool, then we're not supporting them to do that.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you, Michelle. Before we do this, can we see the results of the poll yet, or do we have to look at that a little bit later? How is the? Have we got those results yet? I'm just going to have a look on my screen.
Yeah, you can look at your screen, Sarah, or I can say them.
Okay, can you show us those, or can you tell us about those, Nadine? If not,
I can tell you about them. So we have do parents understand the benefits of a balanced approach to risk and risky play? 0, yes, most. Yes, some. We have 65%. No, very few, or none. We have 35%.
Okay.
For the second one, do parents understand how to support the well-being and the resilience in their child through play? We have 1% yes, most, 10%, 71% yes, some, and 21% no, very few. And for the third one, do parents trap their child up in cotton wool, are overprotective? We have 36% yes, 50% yes, some, and 14% no, very few, or none.
Thank you. Thank you very much for everybody for casting your votes in those polls. I think that would be what Michelle and I would expect, wasn't it, Michelle? So yes, some parents understand the benefits of it, but there's a lot of parents who don't, or who actually just understand a little bit of it. I'm actually surprised that not more parents wrap their children up in cotton wool, because certainly in my experience in the UAE, we have a lot of parents that obviously want their children to be safe and sound. And that's what I'm going to just talk about now as well. It is really, really important to work with parents, because obviously for them, their child's safety is paramount, as it is for all of us. We want to return their children happy and healthy at the end of each day. But I've seen lots of parents who really go overboard and try to restrict their child from doing every day, as Michelle called them, thrilling and exciting activities like going on a bike, because they're worried that they're going to fall off the bike or the trike as well. So obviously parents want their children to be happy and well looked after, and they need to trust the person that is looking after them as well. So that's really important that we work with them right from the start and get them to understand about talking to them about risky play. So if you can just go on to the next slide, please, Michelle.
I launched the polls again because we have some people that they joined late, so if they want to answer again.
Okay, we'll come back to those in a little bit as well. So I've been looking at the research to make sure that I do get the facts as well, because we're just doing our own little poll here as well. And it's actually that the research that came from Canada. I found some research from Canada, from some experts in health and safety, and their research says if young children engage in 3 hours of risky play for 10 years, it would take that long for them to be doing themselves a serious injury on average. Now, obviously, there's always the exception to the rule, but really when children do have risky play, they do learn to manage their risks, and we'll talk about that a little bit further on how we can help and support that as well. So we really have to get across to parents, there is that balance of learning going on, and that thrilling and stimulating play, and we're going to talk about exactly how that supports wellbeing and resilience shortly, is really important to them. So right from when parents step into our settings, right when they're looking around or when they're looking at our brochures, when they're looking at our websites, it's really important to let them know our ethos and our belief about the benefits of that risky play to all children. And obviously that is age appropriate as well. And why it's so important is that children really do take their attitude from the adults around them. So we'll look to their parents and look and say, is this safe? Can I do this? And they will internalize their capability, their ability to do an activity from the adults around them. And again, we'll come back to that a little bit later. But as an example of that, I remember many years ago when I was teaching, and I was actually working in a school in the UK, and I had 5-year-olds, and we had a swim pool in that school. So my parents would come and help get the children in my class changed and ready to swim. I think we allowed to swim twice a week in those days, and only in the summertime because it was too cold otherwise. But anyway, so I had twins in my class, and I had a very nervous mother. And the nervous mother would come and help change the children, her boys, before they would get in. And while she was changing the boys, she would say things to the adults around them, to me, to other people. Oh, Mrs. Rogers, they won't get in the water. They're scared of the water. They won't get in. And I had to take her aside and say, please don't say those things in front of your children. Even if you believe them, they will believe it too if they hear it. So we need to say, wow, how exciting it is, how wonderful it is. And when you get in, you will be able to. So it's really, really important to work with parents and give them the confidence in your approach and the confidence that you will be doing your utmost to get that balance right. So that's very much an ongoing thing as well. Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you. And I'm just going to add in here, Sarah, as well. I think it's important that we empathise with parents so we understand where their concerns are coming from, and we support them as well to understand those benefits around risky play.
Just before you move on, just maybe think of something else as well. It's all right, you can leave the slide on. 17 seconds. There's a 17-second rule. So experts say, health and safety experts say, that if you are supervising your child, so whether you're a parent or whether you're a childcare worker, 17 seconds. If you watch them and you're a little bit worried about what's going to happen next, just give them the benefit of the doubt for 17 seconds and see if they can work it out themselves, because we're going to come back to how able children are as well. So don't always jump in. So we need, as Michelle just said, we need to reassure parents that they don't have to be standing right next to their child all the time. Thank you, Michelle. Sorry.
That's okay. So as we've started to mention already, there are lots and lots of benefits to risky play and children taking appropriate risks and challenge. So as we said right at the very beginning, it really does support their resilience. And Sarah, I know, has lots of information for you on the next slide for this one as well. But what it also really does is it allows children to develop their thinking skills. And it also really helps them in terms of their self-confidence, their self-awareness, and their risk assessment abilities for themselves as well. But most important, as we said right at the very beginning, risky play is fun and it's memorable for children. and it makes them feel excited about what they are learning to do. And that really needs to come across in all of the activities that we're doing with children in our settings. But as I said, it's really important for us as practitioners not only to consider the age of the children that we have in our classrooms when it comes to risky play, but also to consider the individual abilities of the children that we have. Because you will have some children in your classroom who are really, really confident at climbing up really quite highly on the climbing frame, whereas you'll have other children who are a little bit more reluctant to do that. Maybe because of things that parents have said in the past, maybe because things you say as a practitioner as well. So we have to be able to gauge where individual children are at within our classrooms and in our outdoor areas when it comes to supporting their risky play. And as we are going to talk about a little bit more in just a couple of slides, it really does help children to manage their own learning around risky play, but in general as well. And when we engage in risky play, it is very much about children being curious. It is very much about them being driven to explore and see what they can do with it. And these are key skills that then apply to all areas of learning and development, all across our early years curriculum, but again, as children move into primary and further education as well. So we do have to know our children, and we have to know what is appropriate for them as well.
Thank you, Michelle. So just to remind ourselves, what does well-being mean? So well-being is both that physical and emotional, that mental sense of being well, and they're very much related. So one is very much related to another. It's about being happiness or being calm and confident rather than bubbly happiness all the time. It's just a sense of having a sense of yourself as being capable as well. And that resilience is about having a go and understanding that things don't always go well, and you can have another try, and it doesn't matter if it doesn't go well. So that resilience is really important too. And we absolutely know as early years practitioners that the things that we do with children in the early years has an impact on them far, far later in life. So it's really important that we build this sense of well-being and resilience in them from an early age. So allowing a child to explore these safe but stimulating environments is really important. It helps them cope with stress, and it helps them cope by overcoming challenges. When we set up risky play, there is no particular you have to do this or you have to do that. It's typically open-ended, and the child can explore it at their own level. There is no sense of I can't do that because somebody else is doing it. It's more a sense of I can do this as I feel comfortable. And gradually it allows children to extend their comfort zone and to feel really good about what they achieve. And that sense of well-being, as Michelle said, will then lend itself to other areas and exploring other areas of the curriculum. Relationships are really important to well-being as well. And when children can experience risky play alongside their friends, we see them exploring those friendships together, exploring that teamwork, exploring who's going to have a go and help each other. We see them extending their conversation, their communication skills, as well as they negotiate and try out things together or on their own. And this also supports their sense of well-being too. It fosters a really positive attitude to things because of that no definite outcome as well. And it improves that creativity as well. And for all children, it helps them understand their own limits of their ability and helps them understand when they need to ask for help or whether they can have a go and try a little bit more as well. So it's really important that we allow this risky play in whatever form it is, as Michelle said, whether it's using a hammer, whether it's on a bicycle outside, whether it's climbing, whether it's exploring something new. Michelle mentioned the word fun, and fun is so important. And that exhilaration, that having a go and trying something out, and if it doesn't quite work, trying it again, really builds up that resilience as well. So it's really important that we do all of these things and allow children this balanced approach to risky play. Thank you, Michelle.
I actually, just when you're talking about that, Sarah, when I was at nursery, one of my favourite things to do was to play in the woodwork area, and we just used to have little different sizes of planks of wood, thicker bits of wood, thinner bits of wood, and we had nails and real hammers that we were just free to use all of the time. But that would horrify lots of people now, and they would think, oh, it's unsafe for children. But it's something that we also used to do as part of my work when I worked in councils, is that we used to teach children in the early years about how to use those tools. And it's certainly something that comes through in the forest school approach as well. So it is starting to come back a little bit more, which is great to see.
And children assess their own abilities, don't they? They kind of like judge it themselves, and then they say, all right, I'll try this bit. Oh, this bit's been successful. I'll have a go at this bit. And it really, and to see that confidence. But you're right, whenever we show our learners videos of children using hammers, that goes around the room, is quite interesting. Anyway, back to you.
So we have, oh, I can't change the screen now. Oh, there we go. So we have started to touch upon this already, in that one of the main benefits of risky play is it really does allow children to become aware of hazards and know that they are there, but also to become really aware of their own limits around those hazards as well. And what we really have to do as practitioners is respect children's feelings around different hazards and challenges, and know when we can support them a little bit further by being really positive and saying, I think you can go a little bit higher, shall we try it? Or, okay, that is high enough for you today, depending on their abilities as well and your knowledge of the children. But as children have more and more opportunities to explore risk, they become more and more aware of what is unsafe for them, and also it allows them to start to think of other ways to overcome that hazard as well. But as we've said, our own fears can really get in the way of supporting risky play. And we do often step in before children have had time to problem solve or come up with another way of doing something. And Sarah did mention the 17-second rule. So try and step back a little bit and just watch what the children are doing and be ready to step in if they need your support. But don't jump in too quickly by always saying to children, stop doing that, be careful. Oh, don't do that, stop. Give them time to explore. And what we need to think about doing as practitioners is draw attention to those hazards so that children foster an awareness of why it might be a hazard or a risk for them. And what that then allows children to do is then be able to manage that for themselves. So if we point out things to children, so for example, notice that the floor is slippery, it may be a good idea to walk here. Or if children are on the climbing frame, okay, so and you are worried about them getting a little bit higher up, just pause with them and ask them, okay, where do you plan to go next? How are you planning on getting up there? And again, children will start to make decisions on that themselves, and they will say to you, okay, actually, I need your help now, or no, I'm good to go and I can keep going with this. So it's really, really important that rather than saying stop doing that or be careful, because we do it all the time as adults, is that we allow children opportunities to seek out that challenge, and we are there to support them when they need it. So, I've gone over a different slide, sorry. So what I want you to think, one's missing from what we had already. Okay, so what I want you to think about now, just very, very quickly, is what are your thoughts around risk and challenge? Do you have a balanced approach to this in your setting? Or do you think you are risk averse and you do wrap children up in cotton wool to avoid them from getting hurt? So have a little think and then pop some of your comments into the chat at the side.
It'd be interesting to see what people say. I think a lot of us do, from the evidence we see, a lot of us are very overprotective.
Yeah, we can be, can't we? And I think we do worry rightly that parents will then complain about their children getting scratches or bruises or bumps. But again, it is all, if done in a safe environment, it is still really important to challenge the children. Oh, we don't any responses, so we'll just...
Okay. It's taken a few minutes. Here they come. Okay, we'll answer some of the questions a little bit later because they're all very valid questions, but we're just going to remind you what's the difference between a hazard and a risk, because we often get asked that as well. So very simply, a hazard is anything that can cause harm. So something that could cause harm is, like, as Michelle said, water on the floor, obviously a hot kettle or a lead, or a trailing lead, anything like that would be a hazard. And then the risk is when we actually think about how dangerous it would be. So is it a high chance, a low chance? So obviously something like a hot kettle or a trailing lead that goes to a kettle or goes to an iron could be a very high risk, because the child, if they did pour the water on themselves, it would be a very bad accident. So if you just think about the hazards that we all manage every single day, we all make assessments every single day. And as adults, we make an assessment of the risk, and then we take an appropriate level of action to minimize the risk. But we can't get rid of all the hazards. So, for example, in the morning, crossing the road or driving your car can be very hazardous, but you take appropriate risks. You go at the appropriate speed if you're driving your car. You are very aware of the other people around you. You use your signals. I hope you do, unless you're sometimes in the UAE and you don't, but you signal so other drivers know what you're doing. Or for young children, when you're bringing them into school or they're coming into school and the cars are being parked, we're very conscious of the hazards from other cars around them. We would hold their hand and make sure that they don't go onto the roads. So hazards are something that could potentially harm, and the risk is it a high chance, a low chance? What could actually do the harm? Thank you, Michelle. Okay.
Oh, I think the slides
We can see us.
Okay. So what we would do from any of those, and Michelle will talk about this more in a moment as well, is we would do a risk assessment. And we're not saying that all risk assessments need to be recorded, but we would certainly think about the hazard. So the hazard could be in our nursery, it could be something like the stairs in our nursery, or the door, or steps, or the climbing frame. We would actually think about what was the risk, and obviously the risk of falling downstairs, if a child did it, would be very high because they would hurt themselves. It wouldn't be quite so high if they were climbing a climbing frame that was only like less than a meter high, for instance, on a soft surface. So we would think about what we already do to minimize it, i.e. put the slide on a soft surface. We would think about what other actions we would need to take, like supervision, and then we would think about who was doing it and what. So that risk assessment needs to be shared with everybody in the nursery. We'll talk about that a little bit later as well. So it's about taking and minimizing those risks, but as Michelle said right at the start, not taking them away, having that balanced approach, appropriate risks, I think you called it, Michelle.
Okay. Perfect. So when it comes to creating risk assessments, and I'm sure lots of you have these already in your classrooms and in your outdoor areas, soft play areas, and so on. These are written risk assessments where you are either minimizing the risk completely, or if they are very, very dangerous, then yes, we would not go ahead and do them. So it's about you making a decision about what is appropriate for the children. A couple of people have mentioned that the doors may be hazards in the classroom. Absolutely correct. Or things like the stairs, if you have stairs in your nursery, we can't take them away. So what we then have to think about doing is identifying the hazard, okay, and then decide who can be at risk and who will be harmed, okay, and then thinking about how do we minimize that risk for children. So for example, stairs, we may have gates at the top and the bottom of our stairs, with signs on them that says please close the gates, okay, but not always everyone follows those, okay, but it is about reviewing those continually and deciding then how do we improve that, or does anything further need to be done? And health and safety is absolutely everyone's responsibility, and it is really important that it is a shared perspective in the classrooms and across the whole nursery. So it's really important that everyone does have discussions about what is appropriate and what is not, and that everyone follows that. That used to be one of my bugbears when I went into nursery settings, and they'd have gates at the top and the bottom of the stairs, But managers used to often be the worst people for leaving them open and just going down them. And I would always make an effort to close the gate behind me. So it is really, really important. And when it comes to your risk assessments, generally they will be reviewed on an annual basis unless there is a new piece of equipment or there has been something that has caused concern and there has been an accident around that area. But I do know that lots and lots of settings tend to do it termly as well, or maybe every 6 months. So depending on the setting you're in, depending on the country you're in, there may be different legislation around how often you need to complete your risk assessments. Yeah, the slides have just gone a little bit out of order. So
that's fine. Okay. Michelle talking about them made me think of two things. So one, the safety equipment is only as good as the people who use it. So absolutely, if gates left open, people need to be taking responsibility for it. And the classic one to me is that quite often in nurseries, we have a gated system, quite rightly, for the entry into nursery. And especially in the morning and pick-up time, drop-off and pick-up time, those gates tend to be left open. And some kind, well-meaning parent looks behind them and sees somebody coming in shortly behind them and leaves the gate open for them. But human nature is if you don't open a gate, you're less likely to close it behind you. So then the person coming in behind that first parent, and there's nobody behind them, they think, oh, the gate's open, I'll just walk through it. And they don't think to close it. So absolutely make sure you close things and encourage people to close gates. I know maybe you're very polite and you hold doors open for people like I do, but that's, in this instance, it's not the best thing to do. So that's one of my things. And my other bugbear about being safety, and this is kind of like going on to the next bit, is that I've seen, and Michelle's seen it too, that we go into nurseries and we see many children walking around nurseries with their hands on the shoulders of the child in front of them. That actually is very dangerous. Children need to balance. They need to balance when they're walking, obviously downstairs, but even when they're walking around the rest of the nursery. And if they've got their hands on the child in front of them, on their shoulders, and I think nursery practitioners, I'm not sure why do they do it, Michelle, to keep them from touching things as they go past, maybe? So I think it's to keep them in order, keep them in a straight line. Then they can't balance themselves. So please stop children putting their hands on the shoulders in front of the child above them. And I've even seen children trying to do that while walking down the stairs. I don't really have any reason that children have to walk in a straight line, even as long as they're walking in a controlled manner. What does it matter whether they're chatting to their friend or walking next to them? As long as you've got an adult at the beginning and at the back of the line in a controlled. Anyway, that's my little pet thing there. So,
and also just on that one, Sarah, we often still see children, if we go into schools, into FS1, FS2, and they walk with their hands behind their back. Again, that is a risk for children, because if they do trip, their natural instinct is to put their hands out in front of them. So if their hands are behind their back, that's going to take longer to do as well. So yeah, just allow children to walk freely from place to place.
And slowly, and praise them walking and all of those things. Okay. All right, so onto this slide before we run out of time as well. Michelle's already talked about some of those hazards as well. So some of those will be our permanent hazards. Some of them things will be like our stair gates, things like cleaning materials. We haven't talked about those, but obviously cleaning materials that are left out or could be left out are a huge hazard to children. So should be kept very, very far away from children in locked cabinets where children can't access them. Some nurseries will do things like washing clothes or washing bed linen at nurseries. We know, for instance, the hazards of children getting hold of washing capsules as well. So things like that may seem like sweets or something interesting for a child to eat. We know that you should not decant cleaning materials into things like water bottles, for instance. They should always be kept in the proper water bottles, or proper container, not the water bottle, containers they come in. So we know that there are those permanent things that we all need to be aware of and make sure that they're everybody's responsibility. But there'll also be changing hazards, like for different activities, for instance. So if you bring an activity with like different food, maybe tasting food, or an activity of painting, even something like that, or even for young children, trying out different things that they may be then putting into their mouths if they're smaller bits. We need to be very aware of that too as well. And as Michelle said, everybody must be consistent. So children learn from the adults around them. We've already said they learn that attitude from the adults around them. But we're going to talk as we go on for the next few slides about adults being good role models and making sure children know the correct ways to do things. And for that to work, we need adults to be consistent for all children. Okay, thank you. So what we're going to talk about in the last few slides is actually some of the different activities that you do in your settings and how can we actually minimize the risk. So with good guidance and correct supervision, we've already said, depending on the age of the children, they'll need a different level of supervision, depending on the activity, depending on the child themselves. As Michelle said, we might have some very competent 4-year-olds at climbing, and we may have some other 4-year-olds that are much less sure of their own ability as well. So, but we've always got to hold in our heads that children have that individual curiosity. If they see something, they want to try it out, they want to test it out, they want to have a go. So it's really, really important for us that we are aware of the age and stage and the individual nature of that child. So obviously, as I've just mentioned about choking, we'd be very careful if we're introducing things into nursery. If younger children have access to smaller pieces of equipment, and I was not saying that you don't do that, but it's just that you would never leave a child unsupervised, a younger child unsupervised, with smaller pieces of equipment they could choke in as well. So that's really important for us. Okay, thank you, Michelle.
So as we've said then, supervision is key when it comes to risky play. And we do need to monitor the children when they are engaged in risky play, but also know when to step in and when to take a step back and allow them and trust them, because trust is a huge part of risky play, to make decisions for themselves as well. So children do need to know that we are there to support and help them, but they also need to know that we allow them to take risk and challenge where appropriate as well. And one really, really good way to do that is to put rules and boundaries into place. Okay, so when I first started managing my nursery here, we had a beautiful tree in the garden that was just begging to be climbed on by children. It had really low branches and so on. And the previous manager had stopped children from climbing on the tree altogether. And sometimes they would go over, they would start to climb on it, but they'd be quickly told to get off by other members of staff. So when I started managing the nursery, we decided together as a team, a few people and a few staff members took a little bit longer to come around to the idea. But we came to an agreement that children could only climb to a certain level on the tree, and there was a scarf put around the tree to indicate where that was, and they could only do it when an adult was nearby to support them. And what that really allowed children to do was just to explore, but also to test their limits, and they loved playing on that as well. So we have to really, really think of appropriate boundaries and rules around risky play as well. And that also applies to things like using scissors, which we'll talk about on the next slide, because these are important skills for children to learn. And we are doing children an injustice if we take them away because we think that accidents will happen there. So again, if we have rules and boundaries around that, then we are giving children small manageable risks. But that's not the same as disregarding their safety. And that is really important to remember as a practitioner as well. So let's think about...
Okay, in the last few minutes, so we just started putting a list together, and it was huge, Michelle, wasn't it, of all the things that children do. So we've just picked a few out, and we're just going to go through a couple of examples, but please put in the chat if there's anything specific you want to talk about. So Michelle just talked about running. Children need to run. It's a basic need of a child, but of course we wouldn't let them run in the classroom. So we would make sure those rules there are very, very clear about where they run. And also we would work with the children on their spatial awareness. So if there were things that they were going to run into even outside, so for instance, sometimes we have poles outside that are holding up sunshades, for instance, we would put cladding around those to make that if there was a bump, there would be a soft a softer landing. If they were having bikes outside, for instance, we would keep them away from a different area, maybe from where they were able to run. So different areas. Michelle, you had a really good example about climbing just then, didn't you, with the tree as well? So actually giving permission and allowing the children to be able to actually do climbing, but again, in a controlled way. And I've certainly seen in nurseries that they have different areas for different age children. So the younger ones can climb on the smaller slides. The older ones need that stimulation, that excitement, that fun of climbing on the larger climbing frames as well.
Can I just
yes, of course.
Here? One that often comes up as well, and we've not put it on here, but it just popped into my head, is children climbing up the slide. And children will often do that because they are seeking out a new challenge, because they are just bored of going down the same slide in the nursery for the 3-4 years that they are there. So they're seeking out new challenges. And again, it's a really important part of their development. There's lots of core stability, lots of balance, lots of coordination in climbing up the slide rather than down. So again, put some boundaries around that to say that if children are coming down the slide, they can't climb up at the same time. And again, supervise children as they're playing with doing that and exploring with doing that. But rather than stopping it altogether, we can allow children to seek out that risk and challenge, but in a suitable way.
I've always keep talking about scissors, but that again is one of my things, that we often see scissors up high that the children can't actually get to. Or if the children are allowed to use scissors, they're those horrible plastic things that don't cut anything. So again, obviously have round-ended scissors, have them in an appropriate container where you can quickly see that they've been put back there. Maybe only allow children to use scissors in that area rather than walk around the room with scissors. But I think you should also teach, as Michelle keeps saying, teach children the right way to hold scissors, the right way to walk around with scissors. Children are very able and capable. And if you have got younger children, then you're not going to have too many pairs of scissors out, depending on the age of the child. But I certainly, when I was teaching my 3-year-olds, I used to have enough scissors in there for everybody in the classroom. And there was never any problem, because they knew if they were using scissors, they sat down. And when they put them away and they finished, or if they handed them to somebody. So as long as all the adults are consistent, that they will be very sensible about using them. I'm very conscious of our time. So we just go on to the last slide, second to last slide, Michelle, please. You said quite rightly about fostering awareness. So yes, definitely walk around the setting with your colleagues and think about the risks, and then make those risk activities. But how to minimize risks is by introducing them gradually to children, by letting them have a go under that adult supervision that we've both spoken about, with that awareness of those risks, but actually let children have a go. So as Michelle said, say things to them like, notice that. Have you noticed that? Or have you noticed that there's water on the floor? What can we do about that? Get children to problem solve for themselves about what they can do to minimize the risk. So do you see what's going on over there, or can you see? And as Michelle just said about like climbing up the side, try moving your feet carefully. Can you do that? So really bringing children's awareness to the environment around them and how they are feeling about doing that as well, because that gives us a good indication of how confident they are as well. So, and when it comes to that problem solving, really say to them, as we've already said, that 17-second rule, it can be 20 seconds, of course, a little bit longer, but that short little bit of time to just pause and say, what's your plan? How are you going to tackle that? What do you know? What will you do? Do you need some help, as Michelle said? So really introduce that risky play. And somebody's already asked about what age. I think you can do it appropriately from a very young age. So even that toddler who's toddling around 2, but again, it depends on the child themselves. It depends how physically capable they are, because that will make a big difference, for instance, going up and down stairs as well. So I don't know, Michelle, if you want to add anything on there.
Yeah, I'm just going to jump in, Sarah, as well here, and just say that consistency really is key in all staff when it comes to promoting risky play and resilience through risky play. And this one can be tricky, because each of us will have our own opinions about what is appropriate for children and what is not. And what we really, really need to do is have a consistent message. So in a staff meeting or something, we're going to have to sit down with our team You may be saying, okay, well, actually, yes, I think that's okay, but you've got team members that are saying, no, it's absolutely not. So you have to come to a common agreement, especially for shared areas of provision. So things like the outdoor area, when staff members interact with different children who are not necessarily in their classroom or in their core room. And again, that is because we need to send consistent messages to children all of the time, so that it's in the same way as their behaviour, so that they know what the expectations are and they don't confuse them by saying, well, actually, she's told me I can do that, but now you're telling me I can't. What am I meant to be doing? So go back with your team, and as well as looking at the risks and the hazards, talk about how do you make it so that they are manageable and appropriate for children as well, so they can engage in risky play. And I am just going to throw in one more thing, sorry, about rough and tumble play, because that is a very, very important part of risky play. It is an important part of children's development. But we often tend to let the boys do it a little bit more roughly than the girls. So again, just be very aware of gender bias when it comes to risky play as well, because there should be no discrimination there whatsoever. And again, children should be able to decide what is an appropriate level for them and what is not for their friends as well.
Thank you, Michelle. Just to finish then, we'd like you to remember that children are very able and children rise to our expectations. There is so many benefits to well-being, resilience, and so many other areas of child development that risky play is absolutely essential. Many children now will not get the opportunities at home. They will not get the opportunities to do the range of activities that we can do in our setting. So it's really important that we do this balance, have this balanced approach to risk, and we see children as able, that we take the time to introduce a range of activities to children, and we think about how we can help them manage their own risk. And of course, we're always working in partnership with parents. So it's really essential to get that ethos across to parents in whatever way you can, from where they come and have a tour around the nursery, to anything you send home, to any displays, to celebrate that risky play and the learning that goes on through it. Michelle, have you got any last things you want to say?
I don't want to keep going on and on and on, because we'll be here all night.
Okay. Thank you very, very much. Thank you very, very much for joining us today. Are there any questions? Oh, I was just trying to think, Michelle, of that lady who's done risky play in the early years. I'll think of her name. We'll send that out afterwards. Sorry,
Yeah.
I can't.
I think there is lots and lots of research around this. There is lots and lots of really good websites there if you just put in risky play in the early years. Places like Canada do tend to have lots of good research on there, but also looking into the Forest School approach and some of their messages around using sort of more natural elements or dangerous tools. You can really sort of explore around Forest School concepts as well.
There's a question here about, well, not a question, a statement really, about using a hot glue gun, and the children are asking questions. So obviously it's a great learning opportunity. Hot glue guns can be very hot, but you can actually get glue guns that still do the same job, and they're a much lower temperature. So you can get lower temperature glue guns now. Erin's saying that she's got a good balance and said about having to advocate, and that's really important for the importance of risky play on multiple occasions. I think if it's great that you value it and your parents will see the value of it too as well. We've said people have said they definitely overprotect, or the parents overprotect. Yeah, stairs, doors are hazards, so definitely hazards, and that's a high risk. I've had a child in my class who had a door shut on their fingers and nipped their fingers. So yes, of course, put those protecting, get those clear plastic protectors on doors. They're a classic place where children have problems. And stairs, liquid spills. If you know there's an area that's got liquid spills a lot, then you can get those mats which are, allow the water to go through a bit as well. But also things like sand or sawdust. So if you have a bucket of sand or sawdust nearby where you know there's going to be a lot of spills, if you can't get to mop the spill up very quickly, putting that down will absorb the water very quickly and will stop it as well.
I think so. Can I just jump in there as well? Around the water tray that we used to have in our classroom, we used to just have sort of child-sized mops. We had towels there as well, so that if the water did get really sort of out of the container and all over the floor, the children then would tidy that up to make it. We did have non-slip mats and things down as well to minimize the hazard, but we taught the children about the risks and the hazards around it, and they used to clean that up themselves. So they would mop up the area, they would use the towels to dry the area, rather than an adult constantly walking around them while they were playing and cleaning everything up. So again, the children were aware of that and what that meant as well.
And that's a really good way to do it. Thank you. Kathleen said quite rightly, focus on prevention. Well, that's exactly what you're doing. You're saying to the children, be aware, this is what could happen, and this is what we'll do. And obviously something like water play, if it's indoors in the classroom, you ask them, try to be careful not to put it all over the floor. You don't fill it up right to the top so everything sloshes over. So you just take, I was going to say, that common sense approach, but Michelle knows that I don't believe in anything such as common sense because we all come to it from different times. So stairs, go on. Good. Thank you. Sorry, somebody, I think it was Erin, was saying about things like stairs, hazards like stairs can be turned into a intentional learning opportunity. Absolutely, absolutely. Make time to go down them properly, as I said, with one adult at the, going down first, one adult at the end. Make sure the children are holding the handrail, but take your time as well. Children are very capable, so no rushing down. And just take time to say to children before we're going down the stairs, just remember, we line up, we go down quietly, we don't touch anybody else. So just be that, that positive as well, that positive reminder. Okay, anything else, Michelle?
I think that was all the comments and questions.
Yeah, about using scissors. Is it Epstein? I'm trying to think of that lady who does the really good risky play. Linda Epstein, is it? I'm trying to think.
I can't remember her name either.
Okay. All right. How would you handle a situation where you have a health and safety inspection and you're asked to literally remove all the risks? Oh, then I would remove the risks I had to remove, but I would also be very show things like risk assessment, show that children were able to use those things sensibly, and have a very professional discussion about the benefits of risky play, how I had assessed the risk, and how therefore we were dealing with it as well. So I would hope that inspectors would understand, but yes, they come with a different hat on, and they come with their health and safety hat on, don't they? So, okay. I think that's all the questions. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Karen, for hosting this again. We really enjoy it.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you, Nadine. In August, yes, definitely. So happy and safe summer to everybody. Thanks, Nadine. Thank you. Thanks, Michelle. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.